Now, you will probably think, oh my God, 20 years on, she's starting all over again, talking about public rights of way. Those of you who were here then will remember David and me at the time banging on your doors umpteenth times saying, can you please help us? Jack asked me whether I'd briefly, and I will try and make this brief, sort of 10 minutes, talk about the public rights of way. I've subdivided these 10 minutes or so into these areas. The historic lack of public rights of way in the SSI woods, landowner issues that we were dealing with then at the time, the public's right, which I will explain in a minute, the battle that we had as a village, I suppose, and where we stand now, and maybe where we want to head over the next however many years. So this is the map that we used in order to explain to villagers who regularly walked, or those who rarely walked, or never walked, or did anything in between. So we've got Adisham here, and the rights of way, the public rights of way that existed at the time, was the one that runs parallel virtually to the street in Adisham, CP 197, the one that is at the very sort of far southern, southwestern end of Adisham, which leads up between Ken Terrett's bungalow, if you know it, and whatever the Adisham Villas, I think it is, and it connects up towards the track that runs up along Woodlands Manor Park. So those two were in existence. Then something which I believe is called Hook Lane, or also referred to as the byway, coming down from Spinney Lane and going up to Tower Woods. And then there is an extra one that leads over towards Arnold and CP 204. Now those were the only public rights of way that existed. But surprisingly, Adisham being a farming community from many years ago, people as of right used many other tracks within Adisham Woods. Now, I was walking somewhere along here when Victoria was tiny, a baby, in a little sort of carrier thing that I had around myself, and I was approached in a very, very unpleasant way by some gamekeepers at the time. One of them was swearing the most horrendous expletives at me. And I didn't know what had hit me really, because there I was with my tiny little baby, just going for a walk. They didn't want us there, and I'm sure it was partly due to issues that they've had with other people, and partly it was due to the fact that they just thought, the landowner thought they had the right to, making sure that we kept out of the woodland and surrounding area. I was very, very upset about it, and in communication with others in the village found out that it wasn't just me who got sworn at, but there were other people, especially elderly ladies. I wasn't one of those at the time, but I might be now. They also had very, very unpleasant experiences. So we thought we'd speak to the landowner. We tried very hard to try and explain where we as a village stood with regards to the woods, and having always walked and felt that we wanted to carry on walking, but that was rebuffed quite severely. And so we decided that we would try and do something about it. And the trying to do something about it ended up with us applying in a very formal way for public rights of way. Now we thought, oh, this is grand. We just fill in these forms, and we're just applying to say, well, we've all collectively used all these tracks for many, many years, and we are just going to say, we've walked them all, we want all of them as public rights of way. To be fair, though, I do want to go back to these two pictures I'm showing you. The landowner at the time, the woodland owner, stroke later on landowner of many of the surrounding fields and so on, they did have issues. I don't want to be unfair and say they didn't. This is a more recent picture, but littering certainly to some extent every now and again was an issue. I think there might have been a rave up and what we call the picnic field, picnic area, which is a sort of sort of 100-year-old thing, celebration of the beginning of spring and so on, where villagers got together and had a picnic, which now I believe is owned by Mr. and Mrs. Farmer. So littering has always been an issue, and motorbikes, unfortunately, also have been an issue. And I don't know how well you can see this picture, but the stringing up of all sorts of things in order to try and stop the motorbikers going through. That is a fairly recent picture, so that's still there, despite of the fact that the inspector who came took a very, very dim view of anybody trying, as much as we might dislike motorbikes using tracks and so on, but she certainly was very, very upset about that and very much against it and said, you will get prosecuted if you do that. So, people have had issues. Now, what is the public right to use tracks that are not public rights of way as such? The public does have a right, if they have been for more than 20 years using a track, and they've used it unhindered, they do have a right to walk it. It's unpleasant for the landowner because they can pin up however many signs they want to, saying keep out and this is private land and so on. If the public have used something as of right, then they do have a right to it. And that is an ongoing thing, and you can apply, if you are in this situation, to have something dedicated and put on the definitive map. And at the time, we were talking about it, and we said enough talking has been done, let's do something about it, let's take action, and let's see whether others feel the same as we did. And there were many people who did feel like we did. So the first thing was that David and I could just fill in some forms in order to apply for public rights of way. The next step was to get some local support. We didn't want to do it on our own because we thought we were just two lone voices. So we approached many villagers to support this and to record very accurately what their personal use of particular tracks were. KCC, in the form of Maria McLaughlin, was quite distinct. She said, you can't apply for all the tracks, that's ridiculous, that'll never go through. So be very, very selective about which ones you want to choose. And we said, well, let's push the boat and let's ask for 4. And she said, well, that's really pushing it, but let's try for it and see if you can get enough evidence together. So these forms, those of you who filled them in will still be thinking, I'm looking at you, Philippa, and Jeffrey and so on, and David, think page after page, because you have to do the same form 4 times if you had used these tracks. All of the tracks, you have to do the same form over and over again, but with different tracks signed on there. So lots of local support was raised. I think there were well over, 113 or 115 people filled in these forms. I've still got the massive box at home. I shifted from here to there to everywhere because I never know whether we'll need it again. I wanted to put this chap on here. This is Emeritus Professor John Fitzpatrick, who used to run the Kent Law Clinic, Professor of Law at the University of Kent. And he was a friend already from a previous case. And he said, I'll help you, because you'll never do it on your own. And we said, really? What, are we doing on our own? No, he said, you won't do it on your own because the paperwork will kill you. And he was quite right. In total, he had about 12 students working on this with ourselves. We spent unbelievable hours on it, and I fed many, many students at our house, and my children grew up for the first 10 years of their lives, breathing, eating, smelling nothing else but public rights of way. We convinced KCC, they took the case on, they said, yes, you're quite right, we've got the evidence, the people were interviewed by Maria McLaughlin in order to make sure that the whole thing had stood up, and she said, okay, I will put this forward, and I can't quite remember what the process was, but which group had to decide that yes, that they would add these particular tracks to the definitive map and make them into public rights of way. It was a very serious thing which we hadn't realized that it was going to be quite so serious. We hadn't realized there was going to be an inspector who would call a public inquiry. We hadn't realized it was quite so formal. But it took place in the Adisham primary school over the summer holidays 1 year, and then there were so many people who were prepared to give evidence. It was sort of held near enough, a bit like a sort of court situation. And there were so many of us that actually we then had to carry on 2 or 3 months later in the village hall here. And then the inspector went away and studied all of this all over again, and luckily found in our favour. So we then had a little get-together, I think in February 2010, and celebrated that we are now officially allowed to walk from A to B anywhere through the woods on those particular public rights of way. Now what the evidence also brought to light was it wasn't just walkers who had habitual use of these tracks through the woods, but there were also riders. So there was certainly one track which became a bridleway and not just a public right of way as a footpath. Now, because things hadn't gone that brilliantly, let's be honest, I think, to say, with the people who, or some of the people who bought the tower woods in their various forms, when we realised that this was going to be an ongoing situation, that the SI woods were also going to be sold off in the same way, and none of us, unfortunately, had the money to buy the whole lot as a job lot. And I think there were talks in the village, could we raise some funds and so on, but I think the figures were so astronomical really that unless we all sort of remortgaged our homes, there wasn't much of a chance of us even collectively buying the woods. We very much felt as a group that we needed to try and create some kind of positive relationship with the SI owners if only we could. And I think we've managed that quite well. We have not weekly but regular contact with the owners. We exchange information freely, so they let us know when they're doing things. We let them know about things that we are concerned about, or where we'd like more information from them. And I think the whole relationship is built on a lot of mutual respect nowadays, which unfortunately we haven't got so much with the people from Towerwoods, although you have created some contact, Jack, with some who are much more open-minded. I think we all have common aims, whether that's landowner or whether that's us. We all want the public rights of way to stay accessible for us all. We want to all protect the SI woods, and we sort of all work together when we get yet another load of youths descending on the woods on their motorbikes, on their track bikes or quad bikes or whatever, and try and get some picture evidence, record dates and times, of when people are unfortunately using the woods as a bit of a playground, which it isn't really made for because of its special situation of SI woods. And then, as a little thank you to all of you, and in memoriam of David, who certainly without him I don't think we would have managed it, because a bit similarly to David Condit, must lie in the name. They get the bit between their teeth and they don't let go. They're a bit like a Doberman that lives at home in my place. They just won't give up, and it's an unbelievable commitment. And I do want to mention you, David, because we wouldn't have got this far with now if it hadn't been for you, and we wouldn't have got the public rights of way had it not been for that, David. And I think that's me done.